Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Adam Tyson, and I'm responsible within DG Research and Innovation for our work on research infrastructures, which, as many of you probably know, is part of Pillar 1 of Horizon 2020 and will be part of Pillar 1 of Horizon Europe also. This is a session which is focused on excellent science, and we're very pleased to have been able to organize this with our colleagues, both in the Directorate General for Education and Culture, our Marie Curie colleagues, but also with colleagues from the European Research Council, from the agency. And it's bringing together the expertise from across Pillar 1 to talk to you today. We are not using Slido today, so you don't need to be looking at your phones while everybody's speaking at the front here. But there will be an opportunity for questions later in the session. And as we're talking about excellent science, it's a truism probably that in order to do excellent science, the first thing you need is excellent scientists. And I'm very pleased that we have a panel of excellent scientists here today. Moderating the session for us, we have Professor Helmut Schobel, who is the director of the Institut Langevin in Grenoble, and also the chair of the League of European Advanced Neutron Sources. And I'm very pleased, Professor, to give you the floor to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's really a great pleasure to be here today. So I was told that I should bring up during the first 7 minutes the temperature, and so I will start out by telling you something personal, which is if you ask me what was the best time in history to live, I would say the present one. And that might come as a surprise if you look at the newspapers, right? And the reason is simply because I think the last 50 years we lived the most outstanding adventure that humans have ever seen. And this adventure was linked to science. 50 years ago, when I was going to my high school, while we stipulated maybe black holes are still a singularity of Einstein's equations, the genome, yeah, it was there, the structure was there. If you look out today, everything has changed. We discover black holes everywhere. We see them merge. Students can order proteins by sending in genetic sequences. The whole world has changed, and your whole life has changed, and we are at the center of that as scientists. And those my age had the privilege to be part of that. So I give you two examples to illustrate why I think what excellence is. Let's go about it in this way. Let's try to define excellence. And the first one you see up there on the screen is two neutron stars colliding. Now, that was a tremendous event. It took place on the 17th of August 2017. The event took place 100 million years ago because the light takes some time to come to us. But that is when gravitational waves discovered this collision. Now, you have to think about what we have achieved here, right? I mean, gravitational waves distort space by 10 to the minus 21. That means even if you take the diameter of the Earth, you have to discover fractions of expansions or expansions that are fractions of the diameter of a nucleus. So that's mind-boggling for me. That's mission impossible, you would say. Even Einstein said, well, I have calculated these things can exist, but they're not observable. And we did it, right? We discovered those, and not only did we get the signal, we got the signal from 3 detectors. Those 3 detectors, one of them in Europe, they determined where the event had happened in the sky. They told the telescopes that we have all around the world, look at that. The telescope looked there. They got information about the elements that were created there. And we know today that our theories that most of the gold on Earth is coming from this kind of event in the same way as most of the uranium is true. So that's incredible impact for me. That widens our cognitive horizon, right? We were in a room like this before. All of a sudden, somebody switched on the lights outside, and we look out to the confines of the universe, and well, we look back to the beginning of the universe. So that's what excellence is. You push the frontiers. You do the things that people told you that were impossible. And you also, and the people who were in those projects, they know very well, you have to fight for many years against the skeptics, and you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to bring the brightest minds together. On the next slide, it's a little bit different, if I can get it. No, that should be a protein now, right? Now imagine just that the 2 neutron stars there are a protein. And so we use some of the elements that were produced by this collision. At the ILL, we get the neutrons out, and we do material science studies. And the protein that you should see up there is a protease, and if you like, for the layman, it's a pair of scissors, right? It's a pair of scissors, and when the AIDS virus duplicates in our immune cells, it buds. It's not mature because it has a protein which is a super protein. It has to be cut up in pieces so that this virus can really be contagious and propagate the disease. So now you can imagine you have a pair of scissors. What can you do? You block the pair of scissors. And if you block the pair of scissors, you make sure that the patient, at least the disease is stopped. It cannot propagate. So that's one of the pharmaceutical targets. And we have about 10 drugs at the moment that work on this. But you have to know the details. Viruses mutate, and there's people here on the podium that know that a lot better than me, and they adapt all the time. So you would like to really know where your drug binds to the structure. And it's very delicate because, as we have found out, for example, you add in a protein, after all, that has 22,000 atoms, you add 4 protons at the periphery and everything changes in the binding site. And this is this extra information that we have contributed with the neutrons. The rest has been done with synchrotrons. It's one of the best studied structures ever by mankind. And there we have the medication, and the people so we put the drug into the protein, we looked at it, and we also checked where's the water, really the tiniest little details, and they now go out and think differently about the next generation. They will maybe put the fluorine ion here or there to improve this binding. So you can't get the protein, sorry for that. So that was the 2 examples. And what does it mean? What is the backbone of this excellence? Well, everywhere you need the brightest people, people that really are convinced of what they are doing in their science, stubborn, pushing things forwards, and they need the best possible tools. If you look at the gravitational waves, that's technology in lasers, in mirror production, pushed to the limits. You need technology for that. And you also see it's all interconnected. Nobody does it normally on their own. So you need also an ecosystem that provides you with the right framework to do this. And one of those, that's those research infrastructures that I am responsible for at the ILL, where we put at the disposition of all those scientists from all natural sciences the best possible tools to do the material research. And we will hear more from that afterwards. So I think I will leave it here for the introduction, and it's a real pleasure. I must say I'm humbled by the people I have here around me on the stage. Okay, so that's the protein you see. On the left, this is an artist's impression of the AIDS virus, and you see it has the polypeptide chain comes in. It's cut at 9 specific points, and we have determined at the ILL what the proton influence is, because that's good for neutrons, and where the water is, and that's the drug that we have investigated, and that's on the market that you can buy in the pharmacy. So thank you very much for the protein. Now back to the panel, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Valeria, and she will tell you a little bit about her research, and in particular also how European programs have helped her with developing all the nice science. If you can switch it on.
Hello? Yes. Thank you. Thank you and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's a great honor to tell you a little bit about my story, and I'm very, very proud of my story because I'm a child of EU funding. I think it's the example that excellent science, fundamental science can indeed deliver impact. And so I'm very, very grateful. I'm very, very proud to be speaking today. So what is my story in a nutshell? I started my PhD many, many years ago. I decided to move from Sicily in Italy to Ireland to do a PhD in physics. I'm a chemist. And it was right at the start, it was a PhD funded within the context of a Marie Curie grant that my supervisor had. So that was the first step into teaching me how to become a scientist. It was the very, very first step. A few years later, after my PhD, I was very, very lucky and fortunate to be funded again by Marie Curie scheme and get an intra-European fellowship, and I had the opportunity to move to the University of Oxford to develop other skills around characterization of materials. That was the very, very step that allowed me to really start thinking independently and move away, get all the baggage I had learned in my PhD, but still develop into an individual scientist, not one that followed her supervisor guidance. From there, just a couple of years after my Marie Curie, I was awarded an ERC starting grant, and that was the game changer for me. I decided to take the ERC starting grant and move back to Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. And back then I had a group of 4 people. I loved the opportunity through the Marie Curie and then later on the ERC starting grant to get my ideas, the ideas that I had in my desk, in my little drawer, to become reality. That was a game changer. Basically, I discovered that through the development of fundamental science, I could actually do impactful science. The ERCs over the year have become 6. I got a consolidator grant after the starting grant and a total of 4 proof of concept grants. And this really made me start looking at industry and applications in a different way. So all the 4 POCs have resulted into 4 licenses to companies like Ferrari in Formula One, Lego, Kenwood, Logitech. And so I truly tell you that this story, I think I'm very, very proud of it because it shows that fundamental science can indeed deliver impact in a broader sense, that is not only academic impact, and we know that is happening in Europe, but is also delivering innovation. So what do I work on? I had prepared a couple of slides. You must be very curious to know what I work on, and I'm not sure whether the technical stuff is ready. There you go. I work with graphene-like materials, which are only 1 atom thick. I say graphene-like because graphene is the most well-known material, but very few people know that there are about 600 other different materials that have all different properties. I call these nanomaterials my superheroes because each one of them have a different property, have a different superpower. So I basically use all the different superpowers for different types of application. But if you change slide, my main focus is around energy storage, batteries and supercapacitors. And we do them as classical devices, but we also do them because we use the fact that these materials are so tiny and flexible and transparent. We use them to do all sorts of printed electronics, printed batteries, transparent, flexible things that can be printed and things like this. So, as I said before, over the years, if I go and look myself and my career development from my Marie Curie fellowship up to today, I've seen my group going from 4 people to 32. And if you change slide, this is a little bit of a snapshot of what this career path and what EU has enabled. Has enabled me to actually work with a lot of different companies. It's enabled me to attract about 20 million euro funding in the last 7 years. And about 50% of it is actually coming from private sector. So it's a pleasure for me to actually tell you my story. And today I've also been elected to the board of the EIC. And it's my main goal to actually translate all the fantastic opportunities that fundamental science do to the next level, because the one thing doesn't close the door to the other. And I'm very, very proud of this, and I hope we will create, we will break the wall of the taboo, and actually we'll all understand that there cannot be innovation without fundamental science. Thank you.
So, next speaker, Ben Feringa, Nobel Prize 2016 in chemistry. Tell us a little bit how excellence in science and
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here at this Research and Innovation Days. And if the first slide will appear, it says, beyond our horizon. Let me emphasize, if we look beyond our horizon, how crucial is it that we have an excellent basis in science and knowledge to make our future possible. Excellence in science means excellence in innovation. Let's not forget that. Challenges for our young people, dreams for the society, opportunities for our industries. That's what we are aiming for. And I must say here immediately that the ERC has been one of the best things that ever happened in Europe. European Research Council programs have enabled excellent science, set the bar in Europe with respect to scientific discoveries, where real progress takes place. When I tour around the world, ladies and gentlemen, I get a lot of praise for European Research Council programs, Marie Curie, and related programs that make it possible that we can recruit and train our best students at an international level, give them international exposure. Yes, it provides us the opportunity to build centers of excellence, as was mentioned by our previous speaker. And what you see here is, it is a mark of excellence recognized all around the world. And of course, there are daring science opportunities and innovations going on in our research institutes around Europe, thanks to these programs. Let me also emphasize that for industry, this is crucial, because industry recognizes where the knowledge hubs, the technological and scientific knowledges, the centers of excellence are in Europe. And they link up because they know they can find there the frontier developments, the expertises, and they find the best young people that they need for their future. Now, talking about young people, let me emphasize that we cannot afford to train our people for today or tomorrow. We have to train them for the next 10, 20 years. They will be the leaders of our industry and our society and do the innovations in industry in 20 years from now. If we train them for today, we are already doing a wrong job. I had the privilege to get a call from Stockholm, the so-called magic call for a scientist, and I can only say how crucial the support for the European Union, 2 ERC grants, major grants, now an ERC proof of concept grant, many Marie Curie, many other programs where we involved, how crucial that was for our science. But let's never forget Why is this the second one here? Can we go back to the previous one? Please? Okay, the previous one, please. Yes. We should not, I cannot emphasize enough that we all rely on the products of human imagination and creativity. But unlike natural resources, ladies and gentlemen, imagination and creativity have no limits. And that will bring us forward. I suppose everybody here has a smartphone. I see this gentleman has here on the front row. Can we go to the next slide? If we go beyond our horizon, we should never forget, ladies and gentlemen, what was the route from fundamental science to modern society with regard to your smartphone. Physics and chemistry made in the 40s and 50s of the past century the discoveries of transistors and liquid crystal display materials that made it possible. But nobody knew that we would have a smartphone. The world did not exist. IBM was just building the first computer that was this size of this room and could do way less than your smartphone now. It took 50 years before we were able to build a smartphone, and we have it since 12 years. And my students can hardly imagine that there was a world without smartphones. It completely changed our world, this new technology. It brought us innovation, the way we communicate with each other. The question was which fundamental scientific discoveries were made, which questions we were asking to make this possible to change the world. And it were physics, chemistry, engineers, computer scientists, and many others that helped us together to build cooperative programs. Once building this scientific excellence, these discoveries, working together with our companies, working in startups, etc., encourage young people also to do bold things. And that make it possible that we have this today. Let me go to the next slide and briefly tell about my story. I have to be brief. So I started after my studies in industry, and I worked 6.5 years at a multinational company, Shell. And then I moved back to the university working on very fundamental science in catalysis, chemical synthesis, and on molecular nanotechnology. And during my whole career, I have been, despite the fact that main focus was on fundamental science, asking bold questions to Mother Nature, I have been working together with industries. And several of my students have started startup companies. Recently, I got a proof of concept grant from the European Union to stimulate some of my students to deliver a new method to do precision therapeutics. Completely different from where we ever started. There is a process in industry running with one of our catalysts, which came from fundamental discoveries in our laboratory for a life-saving drug, 50 times cheaper than everything else that has been produced in the world via this kind of procedure. Just a few examples of where the link was with industries and innovation. Completely new opportunities. But we asked ourselves the question, can you control motion at the nanoscale? Everybody knows in our streets, the cars, the trains, the airplanes, our machines, and our factories, it moves. And we move. I can talk to you, I can lift my arm, I can walk, I can speak. This is thanks to millions and millions of molecular motors. But that bottle does not move, that chair does not move, the wall does not move. How to design motion at the nanoscale? An extremely fundamental problem, almost like a black hole. Because a black hole, something goes in, nothing comes out. I would claim that our research, something comes out. ESC helped us tremendously to challenge the young people, curiosity, to get the best talents, the facilities, and this cooperation that is so crucial to make this possible, because we cannot answer these questions on our own. I'm a chemist, I needed physics, biology, etc. But realize we were able to make the world's first molecular motor. And you might say, fundamental research, science fiction. Why are we doing this? Why do we need that? But realize now, we're now working on making actuators and roving robots, soft robotics, and it will be a really important area for our world. We're working on self-cleaning surfaces, like solar panels and windows that clean themselves. You don't have to wash your car in the future anymore. Self-repair materials. A lot of groups around the world work on that. Completely new opportunities in material science and the way we make things. And smart drugs, I mentioned it already. Drugs with excellent high precision that don't have all the nasty side effects of chemotherapy or can treat antibiotic resistance, just to mention a few examples. And yes, my students are now busy with startup companies, and we have several patents. I had never thought that these kind of applications would come. Yes, it will change the world. It will change Europe. Not today, and not only based, of course, on my motors, but it gives the inspiration, hopefully, for many people that work on science and in particularly on innovation. Possibilities that we have never seen before. I encourage Europe to keep the basis strong. The basis of science, education, for innovation of our future, to keep Europe at the frontiers. And I'm really positive about that. We can do it. We can make the difference. We own it to the next generation. Thank you so much.
So Edith, Director General of the European Molecular Biological Laboratory. That will be a tough job after that, but I know you will do it.
Definitely. Working? Ah, great. And so I'm here indeed to talk about the EMBL and the perception of EMBL, the success of the European Union's projects over the years. And I could also say that I'm a child of European funding, to advance DRC, several Marie Curie fellows, and I wouldn't be standing here as the DG of EMBL if I hadn't actually benefited from this investment. So I thought I would give you sort of some highlights of the different instruments that the European Union has provided, in Pillar 1 in particular, to allow research and innovation to happen. So, of course, the first instrument that we've already talked about are the ERCs, and they have been absolutely transformative. I think that, we can see this around us in science, but I can tell you that we're envied around the world. So Europe should be very proud of this. It's been a huge success, and it should be nurtured and amplified in the future. And I think the synergy grants that were created and then stopped and then recreated more recently are really important, because they do provide the capacity to link up scientists working on different topics across countries and to do something that's truly synergistic together. And I can see that at EMBL. We have 2 of these grants, and it's fantastic to see how they can allow things that could just never be done in another academic context. So the ERCs have, I think, been one of the true sort of feathers in the cap that we should be wearing. Then in terms of the actual infrastructure, so research infrastructures also are essential to perform cutting-edge research and service. And so this is where EMBL feels very strongly about research infrastructures, because EMBL is about life sciences doing basic research, but also service. So it's excellent research, but also providing service to our member states. And parts of this service actually do involve large research infrastructures. So we are linked to, located on, 2 of our sites are on synchrotrons, and maybe we'll be discussing those a little bit more later. One in Grenoble and one in Hamburg, the DAISY campus, the Grenoble campus. We have one of the representatives here. And that's very important in terms of structural biology. I think we're really entering into a new era of understanding, as you heard earlier, which is about really cracking protein structure at the atomic scale and trying to understand not only how proteins fold, but how we can actually use this information to develop vaccines, drug targets, etc. So research infrastructures, we feel, are incredibly important. And the ESFRI program was really important for the development of the research infrastructures that we see around us. For example, EMBL was very involved in the initial stages of setting up Elixir. This is for bioinformatics services around Europe, and Eurobioimaging more recently. And this is really to allow access to the most advanced types of imaging around Europe. And I think this has been a very important success story. But it's something that needs to be maintained, because in biology, we need more and more access to these large infrastructures, and also to the capacity to access, for example, big data, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And if we don't nurture that and we don't allow access to that by providing countries that don't have easy access the capacity to come visit a synchrotron or to go to one of the many sites that are involved in doing advanced imaging, then it sort of defeats the issue. So research infrastructures, I think, are very important, and I hope that in the future we will see them amplified. Then, of course, basic research, applied research, any type of research can't happen without the people. And I think that the Marie Curie fellowships were really, again, sort of an act of genius almost, because it's just amazing to see these young scientists, the best talent can move from one country to another, get trained in the areas that they want to be trained in, perform bottom-up research. So basically, it's the best projects, excellence, just like for the ERCs, it's excellence that is the key word for this. Those are the criteria. Of course, it means that we're transferring know-how and expertise from one place to another, and that's the power of science as well. It's the collaboration, the connectivity, and through that we can actually go way beyond where we would go just each of us in our isolated institutes or even countries. So I think the Marie Curie Fellowship Program has been extremely successful. And another side, actually we have at EMBL as well, through co-funding with the EU, we set up several years ago a program called the iPod program, which is to promote interdisciplinary research between different labs. So to fund an individual, a postdoc, so it's a fellowship for a postdoc, but who works between 2 labs or sometimes 3 labs, or even with industry, so industrial collaborations. And that's been a tremendous success. We've seen what's come out of that, and we have the 4th program that's just been funded, and we've just completed the first call for it. And so I just want to give you one illustration of this, which shows you how, the basic research we do at EMBL does actually can sometimes immediately lead to innovation. So one of the postdocs who was funded on these iPod program, actually working with Christoph Merton, led to the setting up of a spin-off a few years ago called VLabs. And VLabs is about microfluidics. So I don't know how many of you have heard of microfluidic technology, but it's extremely powerful, allows us to isolate in a very high throughput, efficient way single cells and either look at them or isolate the information from them, the omics, the genomics and other, or use them for drug testing. And so this is a way to screen very efficiently thousands, millions of different chemicals, antibodies, or drugs. And so this is the way forward, for example, to developing personalized cancer therapy by testing which particular cocktails of drugs are the most effective and being able to read out at the single cellular level what the changes are and therefore define the best cocktail for individuals. So this is an illustration of some very basic research that ended up leading to industrial innovation. And in fact, one of the partners of this postdoc was actually a big pharma. So that's with respect to the young people. And I wanted to give one example of the kind of scientist we have at EMBL who has managed to combine all those 3 instruments. And so if we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to just say a word about Jan Ellenberg, who has been very active for many years over different framework programs in European research. He was actually instrumental in helping to set up Eurobioimaging and is still instrumental in helping to make it run. He's also the holder of an ERC grant, and he has a postdoc who has a Marie Curie fellowship. He's had several postdocs. And the story that was published just last year that was funded by the ERC funding, is about looking at the very stages of mammalian development to see how chromosomal abnormalities can happen. And of course, this is one of the main reasons why infertility can be found. So understanding why chromosomal aberrations happen during early development, the molecular mechanisms of it, and also just being able to see it happen, follow those first steps and understand how often it happens and then why it happens. That was the project, and it was extremely successful. because the first publication really did actually start to get a feeling of what goes on. So it's actually a movie. I'm not sure it's going to show, though. Is there a movie? Someone can hit a button? No, never mind. You'd see beautiful chromosomes running around and then dividing. What about the next slide? Maybe that would be... next slide? No? Okay, never mind. So anyway, you can watch wonderful chromosomes running around and you can watch them going wrong, which is the main point of this. So this is just an example of someone who is able to do very basic research that could have very important clinical implications and at the same time train young people and also help set up the kinds of infrastructures that we need for the future. And that's what EMBL is about. I should have said it right at the beginning, but EMBL was created not just to do excellent research, but really to serve Europe. We're supported by our member states to produce the best young scientists. We train them, but also to produce the best service, and also to hopefully lead to new eras of research, because we are, I think, the only intergovernmental organization in Europe that is dedicated to life sciences research. And what we hope is to always allow things to go one step ahead. Now you can watch the chromosomes. So you see, so this is, you go from a 1-cell to a 2-cell embryo, and each time it divides, you can actually see what's going on at the chromosomal level. And you can then interfere with, so these are mouse embryos, you can then try to see what would interfere with this, this normal segregation, and why sometimes indeed you end up with abnormal chromosomal segregation. And so now we're starting to have the technologies that allow you not only to visualize this at the chromosomal level, at the protein level, but to purify these individual cells and read their genomes, read their metabolomes, read their transcriptomes. So it's an amazing time. I would echo that this is the most exciting time, I think, in science, because it's a true revolutionary moment where we can handle techniques and technologies that we never had access to before. And so maybe I will just say a few words about the future now and how EMBL sees it with respect to Horizon Europe. So Pillar 1, we think, has been, this is our space, Pillar 1, and it's been very successful for us. Within Pillar 1, I think scientists have really benefited with these different instruments, and that has definitely led to that step towards innovation. But I think that in the future, what we would really like to see is more synergies between, for example, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, the global challenges pillar. And that's something where we feel quite strongly that EMBL could contribute. And I just want to highlight one area. I could have chosen many, but one area, which is the area of big data. So we all hear about the big data, and in the life sciences, we're definitely hitting the big data challenge. We've hit it already. So an EMBL at its UK site, the EBI, the European Bioinformatics Institute, has been collecting, curating data and making it accessible, open access data, ever since it was set up in the 1990s. And what we're realizing more and more is that this big data that's based on molecular biology and basic research in some cases is becoming extremely useful to industry, but also to clinicians, to clinical research, and even to medical practice. So actually getting the information at the genomic level, at the metabolomic level, at the proteomic level, protein structures, all of that data has to be made accessible. And this is where I think that in the future we need to see even more of a support and an investment in this, because this is one of the areas that really goes from the basic to the translational without any kind of silo. This is truly data-driven science that could be useful to help doctors, medics, actually treat their patients appropriately and come up with new therapies, etc. And so this is where I think that EMBL EBI illustrates the power of this, because they did an analysis in 2016, and they showed that the data resources that they have when they used, that those data resources actually lead to 1 billion euros a year in research potential, clinical research potential. So this is a calculation that's available to all if you're interested to see how it was made. But clearly that data is now leading to huge implications and can impact in a very powerful way medical research and clinical practice. So I think that illustrates where the future lies with respect to Horizon Europe. I think we really have to rise up to this big challenge that Pillar 2 is about. And just one word at the end to say that at EMBL, we're starting to think about our future as well. We're going to set up a new program for our next indicative scheme that starts in 2 years. And what we're thinking of is going not just from the atom, the atomic scale with protein structures, et cetera, to the organismal scale, but maybe beyond, and thinking about how organisms live in their environment, which is, of course, what biology is about. It has to happen in nature, but we've been focused very much on what happens in the lab or in a test tube. And we would like to reach out to this environmental challenge, which of course has huge societal interest right now. And we think that biology and life science research can rise up to that challenge because we can start to understand what the impact is of climate change, pesticide use, pollution, and not just send out alarm bells, but hopefully come up with hard data and also maybe some solutions to help prevent or avoid some of the impacts that we're hearing about every day on the news. So on that note, I would just like to thank you for your attention, and I think this is indeed an exciting time for European research, and I think we should be proud at what we've actually achieved in Europe and go forth. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. So if I summarize, one could say everything is great, right? We are excellent everywhere. We live the greatest adventure humans have ever seen. We also have tools in place for research infrastructures, for the individuals, ERC, Marie Curie, the world envies us for. And still yesterday we had a meeting which said, Europe, be careful because get out of the comfort zone. This technological base you rely upon, you start to become second league. So my question would now be to my colleagues here to the left and to the right, and maybe I start with Valeria because you're sitting also on the board, as you have explained to us, of the European Innovation Council. So what can we do better there to make sure that this economy that we all rely upon, already as individuals that like their standard of living, but also as scientists that need big resources, what can we make to help European economy become first league or stay first league?
Thank you for the question, first of all. I think it actually goes back to what we were saying yesterday in terms of we need to make sure that when we put tools in our hands to translate the wonderful science that we do in economical impact and return from the EU. If you look at, we are East and West, we are squashed in the middle, and we have very, very aggressive West and East, and that's what we need to deliver economically for the European Union. What I'm really trying hard and is succeeding so far at the European Innovation Council is to actually remark the understanding that the two things cannot go ahead in isolation. You need to keep resourcing very strongly fundamental science in order to allow that translation and upscaling. There cannot be innovation without fundamental science. That's a fact. So the European Innovation Council will, we are starting now to shape the EIC in the future, but it's basically an enabling tool, and the inspiration of the IAC will be to do for innovation what the ERC and the Marie Curie schemes have done for basic research, and take the precious fundamental research that is developed under Pillar 1 to get economical return for the European Union.
Yeah. So Ben, you have worked at Shell, so you know that world, and you had great scientists. You're yourself a great scientist. So how can we think about tools, maybe also in the context of of Horizon Europe, that would facilitate what Valeria has said, but without putting onto our scientists the wrong pressures, so that instead of delivering where they're absolutely good at, they go after things that they are less good at, and in the end there is maybe not even a return because industry might not accept the hand that we are holding out and that they might not grasp.
Thank you very much for this point, because this is quite crucial, of course. I think most of the scientists, certainly in the areas where I am in, the natural sciences, etc., engineering, they are more than happy to cooperate with industry. I showed you examples, I talked about my own career. But of course, they don't want to compromise working beyond the frontiers, to work on cutting-edge science and to make their mark internationally. Because we, as I mentioned before, we owe it to our young people that we train. I don't want to train people that don't work at the real frontiers. And so, yes, we should be challenged. And we should think about these problems, that might change Europe, that might change our society with respect to building it sustainable. And I'm a chemist, the products and the process of future. But let me ask a question also to my friends in industry. How long can we afford to continue spending hells of lots of money in maintenance research of products and processes that will be obsolete in 10, 20 years from now? I think we have to think daring and connect indeed with the excellence centers, the basic science, etc., to look for real opportunities, because the competition from other parts of the world, and you mentioned from the East, is severe. When I was a student, we all wanted to go to America.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not true anymore. And we can be extremely proud that we built at least programs in Europe, and the ESC is certainly an excellence program there, but also other programs where we attract the best young brains from all over the world to Europe. And industry recognizes that. And besides the opportunities for startups, industry sees, oh, this is a center, EMBL, where we should go when we want to do molecular biology, developing new drugs, etc., based on not on doing Me Too research, but on the understanding of the fundamentals of what is the problem and how are we going to really make breakthroughs in cancer research, in all these other things. This is, I think, that we should value. And of course, yes, there are some, not everything is excellent. We have to build these bridges stronger than ever. But don't compromise on challenging your scientists and your students.
Thank you. So maybe edit.
Just a quick word. I just want to follow up on that. I really believe also that we should be challenged, and we should rise up to this challenge very imaginatively. And I just want to raise, one point about pharma. For example, there's a lot of research going on antibiotic resistance, multi-drug resistance. It's a huge problem. We're saying that by 2050, this will be the major cause of death. Way above cancer and other diseases. So how do we deal with this? And the bad news is pharma is not trying to develop new antibiotics. So who is? Well, at EMBL and in other institutes doing basic research, that is what is driving them, not to develop new drugs, but to say, well, if we can understand how these processes of multi-drug resistance occur, we can prevent them, we can avoid them. So new tricks, new ways of preventing the transfer that happens between bacteria that leads to this sort of amplification of many, many different types of resistance. So that's where you really do need to nurture the basic research, but you do need to find ways of making them the link to industry. And I mean, what I said earlier about these postdoc programs, I think is very important. If we could maybe have postdoc programs where we really do open the door to industrial collaborations, we'll see more and more of them. We're seeing it at EMBL very much with this iPod program. And I think that that's something that we really should be thinking about in the future, to do more of this, and it'll just become even more natural then. So I think that this is, for me,
maybe just a reaction to both of you. This is...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm Madonna here. Provocative. Does it also mean that we don't concentrate enough on the high risk, high gain side that maybe the industrialists are not so keen on because they don't see the market and immediately the return? And we do a little bit of, I think you used the word maintenance research for things that we should give up. Is there enough concentration on?
That's where the ERC is so wonderful. You do high risk. I mean, when I applied for my first advanced ERC, it had to be high risk. So I jumped out of my comfort zone. So I don't think that is the problem. I think the problem is maybe just making sure that we coordinate things and get our acts together to be able to sort of deliver when we can, as quickly as we can. And you're a true success story.
This is true, but I was thinking larger. The ERC is a little pod at the top of the cream. And all the rest, where there is a huge investment into universities and so on, is that at the same level? Or are we talking here today about a pod, which is absolutely excellent, and we could also get gains from the rest if we fostered excellence better in these areas?
We are talking about the cream here,
Yeah.
but we need to, I think we are here to say that this is not enough. More is needed. This is not enough. If we want to be competitive internationally, in resolving major societal challenges and be seen as an economic power place, Europe can contribute to the growth of the financial growth of Europe. We're saying that this is not enough.
Okay.
That's what we're saying.
Okay, I think I got a clear sign. We are fascinated by what we are talking about, but we would like also to hear a little bit from the audience. What are your pressing questions to this illustrious panel sitting around me in terms of excellence of European science? Please, questions. So, first row.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm David Matthews, a reporter at Times Higher Education. I wonder, we're talking about how Horizon Europe is going to be shaping up. We talked about the balance between fundamental science and that being really essential for innovation. I wonder if you have any concerns whether the missions are going to be too focused on innovation, basically. Because obviously the ERC is going to be focused on fundamental research, and the EIC is going to be spinning that research out, making practical use of it. But is the balance shift in that sort of that second pillar? Do you get the sense that that's going to be shifting more towards innovation? Just interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Maybe Valeria, you.
Personally, I would not like to see something imbalanced. As I said, it's important that we start we take the risk as well from an innovation perspective, and there is a lot of wonderful minds and who develop wonderful science, and who it needs to go out basically, and create return. But personally, I would hate to see something imbalanced.
I mean, I think there's a risk, but actually I think that the missions seem as if they're really trying to address these societal challenges at many different levels and to help to structure things a little bit so we really address them in a more kind of consistent way, be it the oceans or the cities or cancer. So I think they have a very structuring role as far as I can see. But yeah, I think we have to keep an eye on that balance. It has to be structuring, not just in that direction of innovation.
And I think also one should again see the whole ecosystem, right? And this is part of it. It already covers quite a number of highly relevant themes, but certainly it is not all inclusive. And in Europe, there's a lot of other things going on in all the other areas that are equally important. Two questions over there and then there.
Hello, I'm Ragnar Lie from Universities Norway, the Rectors Conference of Norway. It seems that we often talk about two things that we think are the same: basic research and excellence as the same thing. But excellence in ERC and Pillar 1 and excellence in Pillar 2 is equally important. But in ERC and Pillar 1, it's the researcher that sets the team, and in Pillar 2, it's we that set the team, and that's the difference. So excellent research can both be basic and applied research. Isn't that correct?
Well, I would say absolutely. But
I don't like at all this division between fundamental or basic and applied. In that sense, you have to ask yourself. Of course, there are tremendous science, innovations, developments, etc. Also in other pillar 2, etc. So let's not make that mistake. Beautiful. But you know, if we take as a lead the societal problems, etc., what are then the questions we are going to ask? What is the breakthrough technology or the basic science that make that possible? I took the smartphone as an example, and I could take 10 other examples. that will. So is it based upon the current knowledge, or is it based upon what science will bring us in 10, 20 years from now, based on the fundamental discoveries that are now made? Yeah, you can continue building ships that sail, but suddenly somebody discovers an engine, and all these sailboats are obsolete. Think also, when you think about societal problems and big societal issues, are there other options? Is the science development going maybe so quickly here or in other parts of the world where we could build new technologies, new opportunities, etc.? So my message is, and I think this is the message of all of us, it's not about good or bad or excellent or whatever. It's about, yeah, how will it be in 20 years from now? And where should we focus? And don't only focus on those things that we know now with the knowledge of today.
Yeah, just maybe to add, the LEDs I find is wonderful, right? I mean, I just read somehow that in India they have sold hundreds of millions of LED bulbs, which brings energy consumption down. I still remember when I was a student that was completely abstract, and there were a couple of small computers that had LEDs because the battery power was not high. And today we sell that stuff, but that was again developed in the 70s. They were red and then they became blue, and now we have them everywhere. So I think when you work on those things, you work on the future. There was a question here.
Yeah, first of all, Ben Valera, I just really want to thank you that you've both volunteered to sit on the councils now of the ERC and the EIC, respectively. I think it's really important that we're here, that we have your voices and your passion and your advocacy at these really important times of transition. So my name is Jan Pomorski from the Guild, and I just wanted to ask about citizen science. You've all really focused on the importance of the frontier, of breaking through the frontier, of thinking about the sorts of things we don't know at the moment. Now, the Commission, quite understandably, is under political pressure, and it really needs to think hard about how to involve citizens. How can we help the Commission really bringing those two together so that we do not compromise on scientific excellence?
So EMBL is very much about outreach, and the new program that we're developing is thinking very much about citizen science. And I just want to give you an example of how that worked and is working still. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Tara Oceans project, which was basically a boat that was launched 10, 15 years ago to go out and explore oceans, marine life deeply, efficiently. It was set up by a cell biologist at EMBL who had a dream, and he was also a sailor, so that helped, Eric Carcenti. And this was set up on a shoestring, but done properly, and has been a huge success, generated amazing amounts of new data. And the principle right from the beginning was we have to reach out every time we go to a specific site, bring in schools, bring in school teachers. So every single stop that Tara does brings in young people to show them what science is about. And now what they're doing, because one single boat can't go and revisit the whole of the world's oceans that frequently, especially because they don't have such a big budget, by the way, they've developed little kits that they are giving out to all boats that they can get their hands on. So all sailors can get this little kit that will allow them to go in and sample. And of course, you have all the information, the geophysical information. So it's happening. I don't think any of us are ignoring this. This is the future. And thanks to all these wonderful technologies we have, this is actually happening. And I know that I was hearing an ELC who was funded this guy who goes bird watching. And basically, he was able to hook up with, again, boats and their GPS system to actually follow how albatrosses are actually moving further and further away, measuring wind speeds and finding out what the impact there is then on how these albatrosses are going to survive, and then using that to get information, again, about marine biology. So it's fascinating, I think, to see how life sciences is indeed going to be life citizen sciences, yeah.
And I think what you say is very interesting because it's about storytelling. I think we all know it's the stories that you tell to the public, the human aspect of the stories, the fascination we have to raise that, and we have to be good at that. And I think if we do that right, and if we tell the right stories, if we have the good narrative, then we also get definitely support.
I think, if I can add, is a moral obligation that we all have. I understand the pressure that the European Commission has towards the public. The public needs to understand why billions of euro go into research as opposed to hospitals, roads, and any other thing. So I think it's an obligation that we have. We need to be loud, and we need to be louder. I don't think we have started. I don't think we do very well. I think we need to be louder, and because delivering good science is delivering societal impact.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. We all have an obligation as scientists and as community to bring to the general audience, to work with reporters, etc., journalists, to make absolutely clear what the process of science is and what it brings back to society. And I can imagine when you are not a scientist, yeah, and you have to deal with putting the money in Europe somewhere, why should we put it on this blue sky science? But realize we also feel a bit guilty, because we could do a much better job, and we should train our young people to do that as well. But let me give, if I'm allowed, one example. I'm a chemist. 20 years we struggled with a chemical reaction, a CC bond formation, that we could not make working. Yeah, nobody in the world. And after 20 years, one of my students, yeah, who was part, by the way, of an ESC program, made a mistake. Give us space to make mistakes. And he made a mistake. And he made the breakthrough. And now, after 5 years, ladies and gentlemen, this is now used in our cooperation with the medical school in the clinic for a new imaging technique to introduce carbon-11 in PET scans for detecting tumors. And my students work in my laboratory and in the medical school. Yeah, and it was mentioned how important imaging is to detect tiny tumors in the body. This is the kind of message that I try to bring to the world. Yeah, this is also, we need that kind of space. Yeah, not everything is predictable. That is, I think, but we have a clear task there, a duty.
I think this is exactly the kind of narrative, exactly the kind of stories we need. We have 3 minutes, so I would like to ask one last question to all of you, and that is, if we are asked to come back here in 5 years' time, Horizon Europe is on the way, nearly through, and we have to report on the success. What kind of stories would we like to tell at that moment? Valeria.
It's a difficult question.
But I can tell you, since an hour.
I can tell you, I can tell you what I would like to see in 5 years' time, coming back here. And if I can be a little bit, I don't know, provocative. I would like to see the budget on fundamental science being multiplied X number of times, because the European Commission has understood that this is the basic of delivering society. And if I can be a little bit provocative, yesterday I was in the panel of the EIC downstairs in the main lecture hall, and there were more than 300, 400 people there. The room was packed. Fundamental science gets a room which is tiny in comparison. In 5 years' time, I would like to see the difference, the swapping.
Great. Dan?
Yeah, I fully agree with that, of course. I would also make me very happy. So yes, in 5 years' time, when I would be here again, I would like to see at least that the basis of fundamental science and basic science is strengthened, you know, but that we also build strong links between, more than now, between fundamental discoveries, which look really weird maybe, or whatever, and we heard some here today, and to see if we can cooperate, yeah, make them to the next step as a kind of a proof of concept or whatever, yeah, how we can build new innovations. Second, I would really like to see that the best talents of the world will come to Europe, that they find us because of the European Union has set out the programs and the facilities, that they want to come to us to work at the frontier, because that is the passion of young people. And third, personally, I would like to find a glimpse of the origin of life. How did the first life forms emerge? This is a very fundamental question, and you will say, why should we put money on that? And groups around Europe work on that, also with some European support. But if we, yeah, get an idea. We get a much better understanding how life works, how our cells works, maybe how we develop new therapies, etc. Developments for the future. This is my dreams.
Thank you.
So I agree on that last one, understanding the molecular basis of life, and that is, I hope, what will be. We won't know in 5 years. I think what I would like to, what I would like to see, is all the stuff that we can't predict. Because when you look at the amount of stuff that's happened in the last 5 years, you know, the discoveries, when we see the new technologies, so I'm actually looking forward to being surprised in 5 years' time, thanks to, you know, the funding of basic research, but also seeing it transiting to all these, you know, kits and applications we can have. I think one thing that I would like to emphasize, though, is that we need to allow access to data and to knowledge. I think we really have to fight for this open access so that everyone, even someone who doesn't really know much about a computer, could go and click on their computer and say, this is how this works. And it can be a practitioner, it can be a nurse, it could be someone working in a company who's thinking, how could I develop a drug that would actually affect this process? And so I think this is what we have to fight for. And the rest of the world is not necessarily thinking that way. China, the US. And I think Europe should fight for that, because that is the future of science.
Thank you. So, well, I finished that off with a personal remark, because what has been said several times, I have lived it personally. I was born in '62, and when I went to Deutsches Gymnasium, to high school, everybody said, if you want to do science, you have to go to the US. And then finally, I realized I could go to Grenoble, and people would say, that's the best place in the world to do neutrons and later synchrotron radiation. And I hope, and then people also say Europe is the best place in the world for conditions of living, right? And in this context, I think as scientists, we have nobody here from social sciences. But when you see what's going on at the world today and which has impact on us, I think we also need good psychiatrists and sociologists, and so to make sure that this world is not only healthy on the body side, but also on the mind, and then that we will all live together in peace, and that Europe is the driving force in this, as we have been for science for the last 500 years, because it was us who kicked it off. We have to make sure it leads to a good end. Right, so thank you very much, all of you, and have a nice day.